What is up, everyone? Welcome to Take Human Action PA, episode 20. Calvin again. I'll be your host for this evening. We just booked another episode for Tuesday, as we have some difficulties later in the week. But Tuesday night at 9 p.m., we're having the last of our currently endorsed candidates. Ross Sylvester is another organizer. He'll be on that night. And we'll go from there and see what happens. That'll be episode 21. For tonight, though, we have another one of our candidate, our second endorsed candidate for state representative by the Mises Caucus. She's also an organizer and candidate for state rep out of Monroe County. Please welcome Anna Pangia to the stream. How you doing tonight, Anna?
Hi, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
You there?
I'm here. Can you?
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Couldn't see you for a minute.
Hi, I'm good.
Yeah, so how you doing tonight?
Great. Just a little nervous, hoping we don't have too much freezing or anything. Yeah. Living in
Yeah,
the
that's fine. Yeah, we did have a little bit of difficulties at the beginning, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
All right.
So why don't you give us your spiel about how you got into the Liberty world and what got you started down this path?
Yeah, no problem. Are you getting a little feedback? It seems to have leveled off. Never mind. So I was working for a really big company, a Fortune 500 company last year. Well, I was with them for 6 years total. And last year in 2021, it became apparent that they were coming up on a vaccine mandate. They started off by just asking us to register voluntarily our vaccination status, even though everybody was working from home. They were saying, we've got to come back to the office and we're only going to let people who are vaccinated back into the office. So that rhetoric right away was, perking up my spidey senses of us moving in a really ugly direction that was really inconsiderate, not only to people who didn't want to get the vaccine, but people who were like, hey, this vaccine doesn't prevent the spread of COVID. So what are we doing? And I realized that while these concerns were all bubbling quietly in the background, nobody was feeling safe enough to outright say something and push back against the rhetoric that was getting thrown around. So that was my push to begin, what I guess really I didn't even realize it was happening at the time, was some activism to be the person who took the risk and spoke out. And I did. I, as I've said before, I fully expected to be immediately fired for some of the stuff I did, even though it wasn't against any rules. It was obviously pushing back against the narrative. And that didn't happen, though. So everybody, please just speak out early, because it incited a lot of people to take my position of, I'm not doing that. I'm not complying with your request. And when they did escalate this polite request to a condition of employment policy, our division was excluded. And I believe it was due to low compliance. So without organizing, we organized and we resisted. And next thing I know, so, when I did that, when I thought I was going to get fired, I was like, well, I'm probably going to have some free time coming up. And I got officially involved with the Libertarian Party. Up until then, I had just been a registered libertarian who was just living my life and working and taking care of my family and keeping my head down. And pretty quickly after I got involved, we had the Pennsylvania convention, we had the national convention, and I'm running for office now because that was the call to action. And in my district, we have a Republican incumbent who did absolutely nothing to speak out in support of businesses who wanted to operate in 2020 but weren't allowed to, hung up on constituents. I've spoken to a couple of them who got basically stonewalled by him. One was actually hung up on, and because he just didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to deal with anybody who was pressing him to do anything that stepped outside of the narrative, basically. So I was like, yeah, we're pretty much getting a bunch of garbage from the establishment, and it's time for somebody to change that.
Yeah. Common theme, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that was your main trigger. Let me ask you this: how would you have described your political views before everything went down with COVID and 2019 and all that? How would you have described them?
Well, I was pretty disenchanted with the status quo for a while, honestly. I thought it was, of course, interesting how Donald Trump co-opted the Republican Party, because everybody knew that he was actually classically a Democrat prior to that. So the description of that, I mean, I'm invoking my thoughts on Donald Trump. I wasn't a big supporter and I didn't vote for him. I pretty much have been casting protest libertarian votes everywhere I can for as long as I can remember. But that was, I think, a sign of at least a narrative that we can jump into and say, like, no, third party candidates totally can win. This is one way that somebody muscled their way into a party and took over. I I think that it's been really clear to me for a long time that corporations and our government, whether it's Republican or Democrat parties that are monopolizing the government, are all really just looking out for their best interests. I've come to really think that the Republican and Democrat parties should just be considered other corporations that are making a lot of money off taxpayers. So it's time to really do something to change it. You are muted.
Monroe County than it is around Philly, where I'm used to. It's just terrible over there. Even if you like work in the city, but don't live in the city, or the other way around, it's just bad no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is still pretty crazy to me that, even though the Republicans in some places were, pretty good on the lockdown situation, just others just did not seem to care at all.
Yeah.
So what led you to be involved with the big L Libertarian Party? Like, what led you from being just libertarian minded to where you are now?
So honestly, I thought that for a really long time that everything was going to be okay. Like, everything's going to work out. But it really, in 2021, with the way that the government was manipulating media, the way that the government and corporations were working together to force people to do this thing that they wanted them to do, that's get vaccinated, that's shut up and put a mask on. It just became clear to me that we were moving in a really bad direction. I mean, even if you talk to people now, as I'm talking to people out on the campaign trail, a lot of people are really becoming certain that we are going to hit a point of revolution. And I would really love to save the system before we get to that point. That would be wonderful. And I feel like this is the only way that I can maybe do something that might avoid that and would secure a better future for my grandchildren. So I have one son, he's 25, just had his birthday yesterday. And he's going to be wanting to start a family soon. And I really feel an obligation to do the best I can to secure a better society for him to raise his family, and then what it's looking like things are moving in. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. I've heard something similar to a few people. Even Dave Smith has said that. I think he might have been the last person I heard to say something along those lines. Just what is the world we're leaving for our children at this rate if things continue on the current path that they're on now?
Yeah. And I mean, and things are becoming more into focus the more that I'm actively involved in the business of politics. It's funny how each side of the duopoly, the Republicans and the Democrats, have taken this position that the only way they're going to save the future is if they destroy the other party. And when it really comes down to it, both of those two parties are not doing anything remarkably different than the others. They're picking these weird lines that are really easy for individuals to engage on to cause division, right? It's guns and it's abortion. I mean, there's more than that, but those are the real hot points, right? And we've had times when the Republicans are totally in charge and can do whatever they want to retrieve our country and return liberty, and they haven't done anything remarkable, right? we've had times when the Democrats have a lot of control, and both of the parties are doing nothing but expanding government, taking more liberties with our tax dollars, making promises that they're not keeping. And even if they keep some of their promises, right, it's taking more from the people to spend their money in ways that not everybody agrees with. When it comes down to it, everybody just wants to be left alone. So that's what we're trying to do, right? Take over the government and make it leave you alone. People love it when I say that.
Right. Exactly.
Great start.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this: who was it that convinced you to run as a state rep, or thought that it might be a good idea, or is that an idea you came up with on your own? Like, how'd that get started?
No, it was not an idea that I came up with on my own. It was, it was really new. I think I had only had a couple of months of active involvement in my county's affiliate when it was time. So I was still playing catch up on the conversations about what our objectives were. And the people who had gotten to know me locally had suggested it was, my now friend, Dwayne Dove, was one of the people who convinced me that I should consider it. And our chair at the time, Joel Getz, the two of them were the first to propose it to me. And my first thought was just like, what? That's crazy. No way. Who? But I realized, I'm pretty smart. I've taken on a lot of jobs where I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and I really rocked it. And I realized I have a lot more experience in what's going on in these big companies that are really the root of a lot of the problems that we're having. And especially with it being, so we'll get into some details, but when I reflected on the exposure that I've had in my background to the cooperative nature between government and corporations, that's when I really realized that I've got a lot of experience to tap into that could probably serve me well in this job. Mm-hmm. So I did not have the idea on my own, which I think is a good thing, actually.
Right. And yeah, that is definitely a good thing, to not be caught up in the system and how it can, drag you in with its temptation and the corruption in it. But we've been talking before the episode, and it seems like, what your previous job and your background played a lot into what your biggest issues are now. So can you describe how your experience in your previous job has shaped your views on the issues now, and how you've incorporated that into your campaign?
Yeah. Well, so my most recent position, I'm a licensed customs broker. So if you don't know a lot about customs brokerage, the license is administered by at the federal level, and it's got a very low passing rate. So it's a very rigorous test that most people take a lot of training to finish. But so I'm going to tell you what the low passing rate is. It's usually fluctuating between 15 and at best 25% passing rate. They've had years where it was in the single digits and it's offered twice a year. But the truth of the matter is, right, in all honesty, it's a low barrier to entry. You don't have to take training. You don't have to go to college or do special courses to take the test. So that probably contributes to the low passing rate, but it is a really rigorous exam where you have to like study a 10-inch book of regulations to even begin to be able to pass the exam. And it's a really tight time restriction. So that's one of the things going into a professional job with that kind of certification. gets you a lot more credibility. And kind of circling back to what I said before, some of the things that I was saying when I was speaking out at work, I was talking about how these regulations, executive orders applied to our company and how they didn't. Basically, how our HR team was basically lying to everybody. I had the credibility to say those things because that's what they literally paid me to do, to interpret how regulations impact our business and to help make decisions along those lines. So in this capacity, where I worked from 2016 through 2022, just this past year, I handled imports into the US and Canada. So I was really up to speed on everything that was happening, right? With all the trade issues with China that Trump was pushing. And a lot of, I had a heavy stream coming into the US from Mexico. So I got very familiar with what was happening at the southern border. I also got really familiar with my colleagues in Mexico. So I do have a lot of respect for people who want to come to the U.S. I don't fall easily into the pitfalls of dehumanizing them, even though I do have thoughts about the need to regulate the border. Like, I don't think that we should just have open borders, right? That's one of those things that gets out there about libertarians that we should address up front for people about who, there are some schools of thought about open borders, but especially with the way that tax money goes towards taking care of people within the US, I don't think that it would be appropriate to have open borders. And the Lord knows, with U.S. Customs, if you talk to any customs officer, they really need support in managing and maintaining law and order. So let's see. I think the thing that really comes into play that is probably a little more relevant was my experience prior to that. So between 2006 and 2016, I worked for Sanofi Pasteur. That's the largest vaccine manufacturer in the US. Might be in North America, but I'm not positive at this point. So most of that time I worked in regulatory affairs, where we managed I was basically at the tail end of the batch release process. So if you're not familiar with vaccines, the FDA actually does issue a release for every batch of vaccine that's put out into the market. But what people don't know is that it's a really cooperative relationship. So I know that we can't, just because there are rules on the books, I know the extent to which they're not necessarily followed. And that's not to say that any individual working at a pharmaceutical company is actively breaking the rules. It's just the way the relationships have evolved. Regulatory capture is a real thing. The regulators and the industries that they regulate are so codependent on each other that I can see the ways in which it is and could be even further abused. So, one thing that comes up. You are muted, Calvin. I don't know if it's just me.
Yeah, I was starting to wonder if I should drop off and come back.
Are you having?
I'm gonna give that a try, but while I'm doing that, so let me ask you this: as a state rep, let's say you were elected and put into office. So what do you think you could do to, let's say, reduce the amount of cooperation that goes on? Is there an impact that you have on that, and at least make it more independent so that the cozy relationship it's what led to a lot of the mandates that we had to begin with, the fact that it was so cozy and the fast approval and everything. So is there anything, have you thought about what you can do from your position as state rep to make things better than the current status quo?
And that's tough, right, at the state level, because what we're really talking about is federal regulations of things. At the
I'll be
state
right
level,
back and keep
no
going.
problem. I'll just riff, Calvin. Bye.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So at the state level, we've got the challenge of, the distribution is managed at the state level, because there are licenses for distributing pharmaceuticals, but the licensing really for individual products that pharmaceutical companies sell is managed at the federal level. So it would be pretty hard for a person at in a state legislator to try to put the brakes on that, right? Like, we've got some really good opportunities for distributing drugs and making them available to people. I know, our state rep who's running in Erie, Michael Thomas, right? He is pretty well read up on the opportunities for using dispensaries, right? So coupling up some drugs that we can make go generic and using the current marijuana dispensary system, and I find that fascinating. So there could be some ways maybe that we can help to get people access to products, but when it comes to putting the brakes on actually approving pharmaceutical products for market, you're looking at the federal level where that's got to be managed.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It seems like you were saying something similar to what Michael Thomas said on the last interview.
I did. I referenced him while you were off. Yeah. He's really good on that point and that opportunity for us. The best that I could probably do is, if elected, really help to raise awareness by using my platform and my access to people to help to move some of these things in a better direction.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's the things that you're not going to find a Democrat or a Republican talking about, because everybody above them in the chain is going to be mad at them.
Yeah.
Lose their funding. And yeah, I don't have any funding for you to take away.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's, we've mentioned on the show a number of times at this point, so I don't know if we need to explain what it is again, but defend the guard, like none of the other parties are talking about that. So it's another one of those perfect issues that you can just bring up, and it almost puts the rest of them to shame just right off the bat that no one else is talking about it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to using Election Day also to spread awareness of Defend the Guard. So, beyond pushing the libertarian agenda, these are libertarian ideas that we want to advance. Whether we're winning elections or not, we still want to be promoting these opportunities where the voters can at least shame whoever does win the elections into sponsoring good legislation.
Right. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just like Scott Horton says, we're attacking the left from the left and the right from the right. We're better at the issues that the left is good on, and we're better than the right on the issues that the right is good on.
Yeah. And I've had it really coming into focus in the last couple of weeks that people have gotten so disconnected from each other. Going back to the Democrats, the hardcore Democrats and the hardcore Republicans have been pushed into these corners where they don't understand each other to such an extent that they think let's just say it's a Democrat that I'm talking to, and they're learning about libertarianism, and they get excited about some of the stuff that we're saying, and their thought is, oh my gosh, though, all my Democrat friends are going to love what you're saying so much that the Republicans are going to win. And then when I'm talking to Republicans, I'm sorry, that the Republicans are going to win if we go and vote for libertarians, right? So the Democrats are scared that we're taking votes from Democrats, and then those filthy Republicans are going to win. Well, when I talk to Republicans, they've got the same exact concern, but in the flip, right? They're liking everything that we have to say to such an extent that they're afraid that all their Republican friends are going to vote for libertarians and the filthy Democrats are going to win. And So I keep having this same conversation over and over with people and explaining to them, like, oh, okay, you Democrat who just expressed that concern to me, when I talk to Republicans, they say the same thing. Like, if we could break free from these shackles that I know some people don't like the term duopoly, but they are working together. I'm convinced to keep everyone in this mindset that they must, without wavering, support the team of the D's or the R's, because if they don't, the world's going to end. And it's I don't know what it's going to take, but that's the mission that I feel that I'm on at this point, is to show people that you all want the same thing. You all really want the same thing. You all really just want to be left alone to live your life as you see fit. You're muted.
They definitely collaborate on some of the worst issues, like, well, ballot access. Obviously, they seem to want to crowd everybody else out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they seem to, like you're saying, they seem to think it's okay to just, go and, increase the size of government. One party actually talks about, decreasing it, but they don't.
Right.
Taxes seem to go up almost regardless of who's in power. We're still bombing every single Middle Eastern country almost. And then, we might have World War III too now. So, that's
yeah. And they're talking about like reducing taxes for everybody, right? You just alluded to that. And it's not happening. No, we're still, oh, you are muted.
Just reading recently that they're about to up the gas tax again. And between that and the tolls, like, we're already I think for the tolls, we already are at the highest in the nation for the turnpike in general.
Yeah.
Gas tax, I know, is already pretty high up there too. So what do you think you can do on the state level? Because I know right now they say it's like, it funds the turnpike and everything, but it seems like they just take that money and they use it for other places for more than just the roads. But even that aside, what's a better way to fund the roads? How do you think you can reduce the gas tax and the taxes for the turnpike while still, having the roads?
So the roads, good grief. When we allow so privatizing, honestly, is it's the way to go. When we allow the government to keep control of any sort of thing that is for the general good, it becomes like really nobody's responsible. Like, no individual,
right?
No individual or no company that's concerned about maintaining a contract or, keeping you coming to them for a service is going to feel obligated to do a good job, because ultimately when it fails, no individual, no entity, no business that cares about its reputation is held responsible. This is it's an expansion of a really simple concept. And it's I think it's a Mennonite proverb or something, where if you have two people responsible for watering a horse, you end up with a dead horse, right? So by taking our tax dollars, which we don't have an option to take away from them when they're doing a bad job, and using them to the extent that they see fit, they being, right, the current state of affairs where it's a Democrat and Republican monopolized government, it makes it so that they can't be held responsible. We can't take our money and go somewhere else. I mean, it's the same problem that we're having with the schools, quite frankly, right? The money is always going to be there. It's always guaranteed. And whenever there's problems and they're not doing a good job, it's because they need more money.
Yeah, it's become a money pit, just like everything else in the public sector.
Yeah.
So is my audio okay?
It is. You're fine.
Okay.
As long as you're not muted, you're good.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We'll continue. If it keeps happening, I might try to leave one more time. But so that aside, so short of complete privatization, which would be the ideal, but it's not necessarily something you'd be able to do in your first term. If you have any other solutions in mind that might help alleviate the problem?
Well, I mean, how about just summarizing the revenue and the expenditures in a way that makes it really easy for common taxpayers to digest? Would be really nice. Like I would have no obligation to be carrying water for anybody else who's in the establishment. So, I've made enemies before. I wouldn't mind doing it again if what it is increasing transparency for the people in my district, and really it's the people of Pennsylvania in general.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. So what are some other big issues of yours that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, so we've got a problem with the medical marijuana landscape at the moment is, just enough to keep people who care happy that they're at least getting something, that they're at least getting some sort of allowance to consume an intoxicant that's not as detrimental to your health as alcohol. So, and then the people who don't care, who it doesn't affect, they think that everything's just fine and dandy. But the stories that aren't getting out there is stuff like people who are getting DUIs because they have marijuana in their system, which they have in their system even if they haven't smoked in 48 hours, and losing their right to drive, being forced to spend a lot of money on that expensive DUI. You can't afford it.
Right.
Yeah, you can't afford it. That's disgusting. Like you're penalizing people who maybe haven't even committed a moving violation. But like I talked to a couple that the husband, they have one car in the family. The husband got a DUI because he had marijuana in his system. He's a medical marijuana permit user. And the only way he's allowed to drive is if they pay to transfer the car into his name, if they pay to put a breathalyzer on his car. So like, if you didn't even realize, a lot of people, this is the first they're hearing it. Even people who have medical marijuana licenses are shocked when they've not heard these stories. He has to put a breathalyzer on his car, Calvin. Just like they do when someone has an alcohol related DUI. So it's not actually even meeting or solving the problem that they're pretending to try to address. And as a medical marijuana user, he's essentially never going to be test negative for marijuana while he's driving, even though he's perfectly sober. The other really gross thing that's happening with our medical marijuana users is that they're getting letters to renew their marijuana permits with they're getting letters with their marijuana renewal permits telling them that they can only submit it if they turn in their concealed carry permits.
Yeah, there's a certain other podcaster in Bucks County who brings that up a lot on his show. You probably know who I'm talking about, Adam Nutter.
I don't listen to all of Adam's episodes. I've tried.
He's mentioned that multiple times on his show. He can carry, but I think he has a marijuana card, but he can never have a gun permit now.
Yeah,
that's it's just crazy.
Yeah. And they promised it wasn't going to be like that, and it's just not true. Mm-hmm. It's just not true.
Well, there's a chance that might change now. I mentioned on the last episode, but Biden saying, "Oh, we're going to release people at the federal level," so maybe they're going to do it at the state level. I don't know. Let's see.
Let's take a second and talk about that. Why don't we? Right?
Sure. One other thing I'll say first, though, before you go into it, is I remember way back when the only good thing, like before he ran for Senate, the only good thing we ever said about Fetterman was, maybe he's solid on marijuana, maybe he'll like push for that to be legal, and it never happened. And now he's running for Senate. It's like, okay, the one good thing that like you were ever maybe going to do, you didn't do. So why should we let you run for Senate now? It's terrible. Should have happened a long time ago.
Well, if they resolved that issue to the voters' satisfaction, that would just be one more thing off the table that they could keep us, grasping for.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Biden's pardon. So Biden's pardon of simple marijuana possession, right? It only affects, so keep in mind, we're talking about the federal level. So at the federal level, we've only had 6,500 people convicted of simple marijuana possession. And I believe that's since 1992. That's not like this year. That's in a really long time. And the feds don't bring that charge on people unless they're charging them with something else too, right? It's called stacking charges. And that's one of the simplest, most basic charges that a Fed is going to come after you for. And you absolutely are getting nailed with something else along the way. So I will be very shocked if Biden's move to pardon those people actually results in any individual regaining any of their rights, because they've still got other charges like intent to distribute, because God forbid they had a scale in their possession as well. So I feel it's very unlikely that it's actually going to cause any individual to have relief. Some of them are probably dead by now, because we're talking about such a long span that accounts for that 6,500 number. And then I think what he said about we're going to look at the scheduling. So vague. We're going to look at the scheduling. We looked, it's Schedule 1. Fentanyl is Schedule 2. He is talking out of his rear end. It's nonsense, and it's doing nothing but make him look good to people who don't really think deeply about it. And that's it. Like, they don't want anybody to think deeply, and we're all so busy. Who's got the freaking time for it anyway? You just want to trust people and trust that what they're saying means something. And I don't think what Biden said means anything. It's smoke and mirrors.
Well, if it's anything like the student debt cancellation, or at least what's happened with it so far, then that's exactly what's going to happen. Because I heard it got, I haven't checked this, but I heard it got held up in court, and then there's a chance it may not even happen. So we'll see. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of cases to be made, like, oh, what if I just finished paying it off? Like, oh, what if I never got in debt to begin with? Like,
yeah, it's really unfair to a lot of people. The student debt issue, the problem in the first place was the guaranteed student loans, right? Because it lowered the barriers of entry to college. So 18-year-olds were like, yeah, I want to go to college. Oh, like the ability to recognize the long-term ramifications of taking on big loans when you're 18, 19, 20 years old is very underdeveloped. So a lot of people put themselves into debt. And then what happened? The next thing that happened after that was the market was flooded. The job market was flooded with accredited applicants. So like never before did they have such a selection of applicants with bachelor's degree. Well, it's not like anything major changed in the job market. We didn't have all of a sudden these big influx of professional jobs. What did they do? They lowered the standard. Well, let's say not lowered it, but right, you've got a scale, and it used to be like right about here you would need to have a degree, and then there's these lower jobs where you could do entry level without a degree, and they were just like, oh, but now we have all these applicants, we'll just make these jobs require the degree too. So jobs that you used to be able to work your way up to just with a little bit of experience at a company, you no longer could even be considered for unless you had a degree. That's exactly what happened in the job market. I know it because it was my experience, and it was the experience of many people around me. I did not finish my degree right out of high school because I got pregnant with and had my son instead. And so when he was in middle school, I was going to school to finish my bachelor's degree so that I was eligible for promotion to a job that I was otherwise perfectly qualified for. And I took on more debt in the meantime. I was fortunate that it wasn't too bad because I was working for a company that helped to pay for the college. But I did have to take out loans just to even make it possible. So basically, then now, what are you doing? You're repaying a loan for a job that you could have gotten for free 15 years ago. So you're essentially like taking out a mortgage on your future earnings. And that's how we ended up in this crisis, right? So we're devaluing the dollar, we're devaluing earnings, and you are muted.
Ease of access for the loans, it just keeps ballooning the cost of colleges, and then you have to loan people more. And it's just gone up and up and up. And I certainly didn't realize this right away, but
yeah,
there were a couple of colleges I could have gone to. I ended up choosing one that I had at least somewhat of a scholarship for. So I'd chosen one with a full, full charge private school with no tuition whatsoever. That would have been terrible.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I didn't do that now, because now there's at least a chance I can pay it all off. Before, just no.
Yeah.
No.
Well, the other wild thing, here's another wild thing, that I remember when I first learned this, I thought, oh, I wish I had known that. Like I lacked the perspective at the time. But in most cases, if a student who required financial aid had gone to a more expensive college, they would likely receive more financial aid. And financial aid comes, sure, in the form of grants, but also in the form of loans. You would become eligible for more if you went to a more expensive school. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Once you take away that competition of making cost one of the things that attracts your customers, meaning your students, yeah, the prices went up and up. We've heard a lot of people that can make those arguments.
Mm-hmm.
So, point being, the government interference with the free market in the first place is why we have a student debt crisis. And I think that illustration is lost on a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say to someone who points out more state-funded colleges, like community colleges or Penn State, and use that as a counterexample of why public schools are better, or publicly funded schools? What would be your response to that? Because they cost less, and
yeah,
they still provide one could argue the same education.
One could argue that the more affordable schools are providing the same education as the more expensive schools. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Is there any way that we can shift the landscape to make it more advantageous for people for philanthropic contributions to state school, or to community colleges, for example, right? Over the schools that have hundreds of millions of dollars saved up so that they can make their schools more luxurious to attract students. Frankly, what needs to happen is a total abolishment of the guaranteed student loans in the first place. And that would seem like an inhumane act to people now because they've become used to that being a standard. But I think that's what it's going to take to really fix the problem.
Yeah, the prices would collapse almost overnight the minute that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it would be a big shock to the system. And like I said, we've already got too many accredited candidates in the job pool to begin with, but so many other things in that market have shifted to meet that paradigm that it would take a really rough time of belt tightening, of people not being able to achieve the things they thought they'd be able to. It is quite the mess.
Yeah, it's going to take a long time and more than one term in the Pennsylvania House to untangle that web. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So what are some other issues that you're focusing on that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, we've got let's see, what did we talk about? We've got the No, you already brought up Defend the Guard. I mean, I don't, we didn't really get into exactly what Defend the Guard is, and for anyone who maybe isn't plugged into all the stuff that we're plugged into, right? It's worth clarifying that it's an organization that's working nationwide, right? But it's got factions in each state, because this is a state level legislation that needs to be passed to not permit the federal government to meddle with the state's National Guard division. And it wouldn't allow them to deploy their National Guard to active combat. I think you could even, I don't know if this is standard or if this is a variation in it, like to even deploy it to another state without some additional permissions, right? So not to active combat if they haven't declared an actual war by Congress, right? Congress is who declares war. And so one of the things that this would help is to make sure that the National Guard is available whenever any state has a natural disaster or some other event that would require their support. And it's, National Guard enlistees are being treated so unfairly, where they're signing up to do something that they think is going to keep them stateside and keep them near home, and then they're being surprised with these assignments that seem to be not consistent with the charter of the National Guard, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You'd think the Pennsylvania National Guard would stay in Pennsylvania and not go other places, but that's not always what ends up happening.
Yeah. So I did want to clarify that a little more, because we have to remember that we've got people pulling in from offline that aren't built in on the same stuff we are.
Yep, that's a good point. So one other issue that I want to touch on is what most people call Second Amendment issues. Although in Pennsylvania we do have a provision in our Bill of Rights for that as well, except that I believe it reads the right to keep and bear arms
shall not be questioned.
Thank you.
It's a good one.
Yeah, which is even stronger, you might say. So, well, I mean, I think the text reads itself, but what's your position on the so-called Second Amendment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a family that's always been very pro Second Amendment. We don't think who cares what my husband thinks, right? But I don't think that there's any reason why people shouldn't be permitted to build a gun. Right? If you can build something with your own two hands. So that's what a ghost gun is, right? Something that you've made yourself, that isn't serialized. And the fact that they're trying to get into our homes and know what it is that we're making with our own two hands. It's not like we're importing controlled substances or controlled vectors to try and create like dirty bombs or anything like that. We're the micromanaging of all of the specifications about how long a barrel can be and what accessories to make it comfortable for you to press against your shoulder when you use a gun is just absolutely absurd. And it is not going to solve the problems of mass shootings. It's not getting to the root of the problem at all. It's just meddling in the lives of law-abiding gun owners and gun enthusiasts. And the people that would serve to act as our militia. Heaven forbid we ever need to really put one to use, right? So one of the things that I think is really off the radar for people, and I think we need to start, we got to get into the language game, right? So people hear sanctuary cities. They hear sanctuary cities and they think about illegal immigrants being given sanction. But it's really all part of the same nullification game, right? Nullifying the laws that are put forth at the federal level and saying, I'm sorry, they don't apply here. So much like what constitutional sheriffs have done in other places, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be doing that more in our regions that want to keep the federal government out of our homes and out of our private business. And when it comes to gun ownership, I feel that we need to get that employed a lot more.
Yeah, that concept can definitely be widened. We talked about that in the last episode too. That it's interesting to see where these conversations go once you start them. So one other question that I wanted to ask you, I asked you on Torrin's podcast, but I want to ask you again here and see if you've got anything else to add. What are some issues local to your district that you can be vocal about?
We've got a lot of stuff going on with the schools. We have some activist groups that are getting more involved in the schools and trying to fight for what's right for the individual students. And a lot of people are looking for solutions that will meet the needs of their kids. And I think that when we talk about homeschooling, that's one thing where the state of Pennsylvania is just way off the charts compared to most other states, and the activities that they make, not activities, but like the compliance, the points of compliance, right, that they make homeschooling families have to deal with. It's something that we could do a much better job on.
Yeah, for sure. So education in general, we've been more active about this in social media on our page in the past few days. School choice has been coming out more and more. It's been mentioned in the governor's race. So that's definitely something that we should be pushing more as a party as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So then I'll ask one other thing before we wrap up here. So just on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah. So you were telling me you're out doing a campaign event earlier. So talk to us about what that was and what you did, and then any other events you have coming up between now and Election Day.
Oh yeah. We've got, so let's see. So today I was at a small town in my area where I live, Kunkletown. They had a fall festival and there was a live band. And they had face painting for kids. And so, one of the ways that I just try to, I don't like just showing up at places and like shaking people's hands and bothering them and telling them. So I brought a bag of candy for the kids, and I was wearing, here, I'll see if I can show it on the camera. So one of the ways that I get out there, can you see my jacket? Can you see it? Taxation is theft.
Oh, nice. Nice. I like it.
So I go out like that, and it gets people to go like, "What is that? Oh, I like your jacket." and then I can just tell them why I'm wearing it. So, I met a few people, and I mean some people that I know too, because I graduated high school here, so I'm local, local yokel, like most of us in this area.
Can I stop you for a second? Did you have a taxation is theft dress underneath there too?
Oh no, I'm not wearing the taxation.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that around a couple times now. Angela wore one like that.
Yep.
That's starting to become a thing, but
yeah.
Go on.
I do have a dress too, though.
Okay. All right. Nice.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of getting out there and just being a friendly face and talking to people who are receptive to talking about it. And I just hand them my card, and I'm like, hey, that nice lady with the candy, maybe vote for me too. And a lot of people will show some interest and we'll talk more. And that is, a lot of what we've said so far, just being tired of the same old nonsense from Republicans and Democrats who make these promises, who never keep them, who, and I'll give total credit to the individuals that I've talked to. Some people, right? We both have talked to people who've been in the other parties, and they're like, yeah, I literally wasn't allowed to express whatever XYZ position on something because it wasn't consistent with what they wanted, even though it's what I thought was right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there many times before.
hmm And then, so events that I've got coming up. So this Thursday, uh, here's a fun little story. So this Thursday, the 13th, it's called Popcorn and Politics, and it's being held at East Stroudsburg University, and it's hosted by the Pocono Chamber of Commerce and TV 13. And when they sent the invitations out to the candidates for this event, they did not invite me.
Mhm.
And when they posted about the event, which is how I learned of it when it was posted on Facebook, and they said that the 2 districts that would be included in this event and mine was not listed. They explained that not all districts were included because if both candidates weren't available, they wouldn't cover the district. So,
of course.
and then the Chamber of Commerce explained further, so nice of them, that they are a bipartisan organization.
Bipartisan.
Right. So, but now listen, so my snarkiness, like the Chamber of Commerce, let me say immediately, has really actually been pretty awesome because I have had a chat with them and they have already adjusted their language. But it's already out there, so I put together a press release and I sent it to every news outlet explaining that when an organization wants to express that they are impartial, what they really mean is nonpartisan. And that's the language that the chamber started using right away. And again, they were actually really nice for me, talking to me. I even think I picked up a few votes. But that we really need to crack down. We don't want to. We need to crack down on the use of things like both candidates, especially when they're talking about a race or a group of races, when in which at least one of them has 3 candidates. So it's we got to get into the policing the language business a little bit. I think this is a valid area to do it. So that's this Thursday at 7 p.m. Popcorn and Politics at ESU. The doors open at 6:15. By 6 o'clock, I'm going to be assembling with a bunch of people who are coming from the Monroe County affiliate. And we've got some people coming in from Pike County too to join us. We're just going to have a presence. And in my press release, I expressed that I'll be available for interviews afterwards.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So what else you got going on?
Let's see. We got a Pleasant Valley football game on Friday night.
All right, keep it busy.
Yeah, and we've got some stuff with a local the AARP. I'm actually going to be speaking at the Monroe County AARP meeting next Monday. So if you're 55, if you're over 55 in Monroe County, and if you're a member of the AARP, that's at 12:30 in the afternoon on a Monday at the Stroudsburg Volunteer Fire Company.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of speaking events so far. So
Not too bad.
So anything else going on? And if nothing else, tell us what's going on Election Day.
Yeah, so on Election Day, we're going to really kick it up a notch my district is half of Monroe County. So in the 176th district, we're going to be making a strong showing. I have almost gotten enough volunteers to cover all of the locations, but I really want to be doubling up and not putting anybody alone at any location. So I could use more volunteers. If you go to my website, apforpahouse.com, there is a button to vote on, to click on volunteer. I know also, right within the Libertarian Party, we're working on drumming up volunteers. Look at you. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I decided to finally add one of those again. We haven't had one on at least 5 or so episodes. So there we go.
But we're going to make a strong showing. We're going to, convey the level of legitimacy that we actually have to bring to the table. That's the plan. So that's November 8th for anybody who, isn't keeping track. That's another thing. Okay. We have the election day drilled into our head. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people, that's not what they're thinking about. So we have to keep repeating, vote on November 8th. And like and share my posts and stuff on Facebook. And Facebook is where I'm most active. I'm such a mom. I know.
Yeah.
I
So are all your events on the Facebook, Twitter, and website, or where's the best way to figure that out?
Well, let's see. Though, you know what? I haven't, because it's not my events. I'm gonna have to do a better job at maybe creating like an invitation that I can put out there. So yeah, the right, because it's other people's events that I'm kind of crashing and going to, but I will take that your question as a good suggestion to go ahead and put
Yeah,
my
you
up.
could always
Yeah.
make a Facebook event that's like, come see Autumn Pangia at this event.
Right,
Something.
right. Well, yeah, I mean, maybe what I'll have to do is kind of make it as like a side thing, like right after the event. I don't want to, I don't want to co-opt their event and make enemies in the process.
Yeah, well, one way or another, go to the website, go to the Facebook and Twitter to get updates about the events and when they're going on and where you can go and when they are and all that. So, any final words?
You know, vote libertarian, get really good on messaging, accept that people are stuck in their ways so that you can understand where they're coming from and help to meet them where they're at.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks for a great interview, Autumn. And thanks to everyone and Autumn for dealing with the technical difficulties here. We'll have that resolved by next episode, which will be on Tuesday at 9 p.m. with Ross Sylvester.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for tuning in to Take Human Action PA episode 20, and have a good night.
Good night.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.
Bye.
All right.